All right, so next up on the agenda, we've got an update on tax, and I'll hand it over to Chairman Waldrop to talk about three-year depreciation incentives.
Well, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren Basil. Lauren works for us. She's at the Alpine Group, works with Greg Means, and Lauren is our principal tax person. She can talk broad terms about not only three-year depreciation, but also some of the tax issues that have been in the conversation related to Biden's infrastructure bill. So Lauren, and their potential impact on the horse racing industry. Lauren?
Alex, as you all know, the three-year depreciation provision was extended through the end of 2021.
Lauren, can you give them a quick overview of why three-year depreciation is important?
Sure. Under prior law, prior to 2008, racehorses that were 24 months or younger faced a depreciation period of 7 years, while racehorses 2 years and older were able to be depreciated over a 3-year period. In 2008, in the Farm Bill, we were able to secure the 3-year depreciation period for racehorses without regard to how old they were, so that our younger horses could be depreciated faster, more in line with both the income of those horses and when the expenses for those horses were coming in. So a better match between income and expenses. We were able to secure the shorter depreciation period, but only for a temporary amount of time. And so we have been stuck in what has been traditionally known as the package of tax extenders that every year gets acted upon. Sometimes it gets acted upon after they've already expired, so we have to do a look back. But we have to continually fight every year to keep that depreciation benefit in the law. In 2017, in the Tax Reform Act and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Congress provided for 100% bonus depreciation, 100% expensing for our capital investments, including racehorses. And so the 3-year depreciation period became a little bit less important, but still important nonetheless, because Congress allowed taxpayers the choice of either taking the 100% immediate expensing or utilizing existing accelerated depreciation rules, which without our provision being active would have thrown us back into a 7-year write-off period for the younger horses. So we've kept fighting to keep this provision in the law, even though a good number of our folks will take and utilize the first-year bonus. The first-year bonus depreciation, the 100% bonus depreciation, that'll expire at the end of 2023. And we'll continue to maintain our posture that, we still be eligible for 100% bonus, but we're at the same time trying to make permanent the allowance of the 3-year depreciation for the youngest horses. So we're trying to essentially eliminate the distinction between horses depending on their age when it comes to their depreciable period, their write-off period. Congressman Andy Barr has been a great champion here, and he has introduced legislation that would make our 3-year depreciation provision permanent, and we're going to continue to support him in those efforts. As I said, the 3-year depreciation on the books right now will expire at the end of 2021, and so we'll be working with our congressional champions to make sure that we get extended in any tax year package that does move forward this year. With respect to the President Biden's infrastructure proposal and the tax provisions that seem to be on the table somewhat, I think the biggest item, that most of us are keeping our eyes on certainly is what happens with the corporate tax rate and what happens with the capital gains tax rates. The president has proposed to increase the capital gains tax rate for high income individuals back up to 37%. So it would equalize it with the ordinary income rate. He also has proposed to raise the corporate tax rate to 28%. Interestingly enough, the president has not made any proposals with respect to the Section 199A deduction for non-incorporated businesses for pass-through business income. But I do understand that there are some Democrats on Capitol Hill that are looking at making a move in that direction, possibly in line with the president's capital gains plan, so that it would impose a limitation or increase the rate on higher income taxpayers who do take that small business deduction. So that's something that we're going to keep our eye on as well. I think that's kind of all I really have in the tax space, Alex, unless there are specific questions or specific provisions that y'all are interested in hearing about.
Any questions for Lauren? Hearing none. Brian, you have some more to add to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. So we have been supporting another Congressman Cuellar bill. He seems to be crossing our path a lot these days. He offered it's called the Main Street Tax Certainty Act of 2021. That's HR 1381. And it's a preemptive measure that would basically prohibit revocation of the Section 199A deduction for small business. It's gained 70 co-sponsors so far. And again, it's a preemptive bill. With our tax Aggies and other groups, we're also engaged in preserving estate tax flexibility. That's on the table as well. Could be used to pay for an infrastructure package. And one of the issues, I won't get into too much detail on that front, is that we really want to preserve a stepped-up basis for estate tax, which would basically narrow a capital gain that you'd have to pay once you inherit a property. So those are a couple of issues we've been working on. Also, I've been hearing, and Lauren, Alex, let me know if you've been hearing the same thing, that it appears that a lot of the Democrats are actually backing off of any sort of effort to raise the corporate rate from 21 back up to say 24, 26% as a pay for. Is that consistent with anything you've been hearing?
Yeah, that it's consistent that the Democrats have not rushed in to use a raise in the corporate rate as a pay for infrastructure. But there are some separate conversations that are going on that involve changes in the international tax structure and rules affecting international multinational companies. And those are conversations being had at the multinational level at the OECD with the EU and the G7 countries. So any increase in the domestic corporate tax rate, I think, will probably be tied to any changes that affect multinational businesses at that level. And so nothing that I see coming down the pike quite early, this year, but definitely something that could be on the horizon for the end of this year, possibly next year.
Right, is that the so-called GILTI tax international?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the GILTI rate and the BEAT tax, which is the base erosion anti-abuse tax, and the GILTI tax, which is a tax on essentially international intangible income. And so it relates in large measure to large multinational companies that have high profits, but very low tax burdens in the countries in which they operate.
Excellent. Any more questions on tax? Frankly, I thought it'd be a lot more active issue this year, considering all the money that's being spent. And people do want to get a lot done on infrastructure. So you'd think they'd be looking really aggressively for pay fors, at least for that package, but definitely a dynamic issue.
One thing in the pay for space, Brian, if I might, that is going to become much more prevalent is enhanced enforcement authority on the part of the IRS, in particular audits of high income individuals. And the president has a proposal to require some additional information reporting on the part of financial institutions to better track certain additional payments among high income individuals, so that they can at least get a better sense of where some income might be leaking through the system. And so we're obviously going to be making sure that there are no additional burdens or unreasonable expectations on the part of either the IRS or financial institutions on folks like ours that do perhaps, have partnerships or business structures that could find themselves subject to some additional information reporting.
Very good.
Thanks, Lauren.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So it looks like we are at item number 7, pandemic rebuild and recovery.
Your name
So
is
we-
listed on the list. I'll let you go. Talk a little
Okay.
bit about what you got.
All right, so we did cover a little bit about this on the federal report on Monday. So for racing committee purposes, I'll drill down in a little bit more detail. It does appear that the government is winding down its efforts to launch any new programs to address the pandemic. Industry does continue, however, to look for possible remedies for remaining projects that need to be done. In late April, the horse industry and its partners did submit a letter to the Small Business Administration requesting guidance on the Shuttered Venue Operator Grants Program. This is a multi-billion-dollar fund aimed mainly at shuttered indoor venues like theaters. The coalition requested that SBA issue guidance to clarify eligibility for outdoor venues. These would cover horse shows, racetracks, livestock shows, among other operations. And although the appetite for new packages is definitely waning, things that we're exploring are trying to convince federal agencies to use some sort of neutral approach when reviewing applications, so it doesn't favor one industry over another. We've also joined the Economic Bridge Coalition to help drive some of these points home to the various small business committees, as well as the tax committees like Ways and Means and Finance. So if we make any hay on that front, which is looking like that's going to be an uphill climb, I'll keep you posted.
Thanks, Brian. Let me just say from the NTRA's perspective, we focused on the Paycheck Protection Program in particular because Congress decided for mostly good reasons to push most of the Paycheck Protection Program money through the Small Business Administration. Unfortunately, the Small Business Administration doesn't lend to farms, gambling entities, single member entities, or 501c6s, which wiped out a big chunk of our industry. And with the help of Senator McConnell, who went to bat for us before SBA, convinced them to issue guidance in which eventually they did loosen up paycheck protection money. It was able to go to qualifying racetracks, horse farms, to small single member entities that had no employees, essentially, other than the owner. And then 501c6s, such as many of you on this call, including the NTRA. So that was one of those things that we had to step up very quickly and react to what were unintended consequences of the legislation. And I'll give Senator McConnell, once again, great credit for getting the attention of the SBA and getting that changed. Any other comments or questions about pandemic response or pandemic related issues?
Alex, we've got a question here about the Shuttered Business Grants program, whether or not nonprofit horse expos would be eligible. And my understanding is yes. Tom, I'll take a closer look at the program, but the criteria is that it's a specific type of expo or program that's indoors. So whether it's a for-profit operation or a nonprofit operation doesn't seem to be a big issue, but I'll look into that. But my first question to you is, would the nonprofit horse expo, that'd be an outdoor operation, correct?
Yes, Brian, I'm here.
Okay.
It is indoors at the Minnesota State
Right.
Fair, so it is indoor, but we do have outdoor exhibits.
Okay.
But our clinics and demonstrations are indoors.
Okay, so my general answer would be that the indoor operation would likely qualify, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. What we're trying to get is applicability for outdoor events for this program. That's our aim. And that would cover, racetracks, horse shows, and other operations. All right, any more questions on shuttered venues or post-pandemic rebuild? Good, so we're moving right along. Next up, Mr. Waldrop, we've got ADW account holder credit card funding transaction declines.
Greg Means, or have you been able to make it on the call?
Let's
I
see,
don't see his name.
I've seen him.
Yeah, I know that he had another call today and would probably be unable to join us. That's fine. I'll take this.
All right,
This is an issue that's been, yeah, I'll go ahead and take the issue myself. This is an issue that's been in front of us for a number of years now, and that relates to the fact that, go back to 2006, when the federal government, when Congress passed the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act of 2006, they gave credit card companies a great deal of leeway in determining whether or not any particular transaction was an illegal wagering transaction. They also allowed them to, in the case of credit cards, to decline any credit transaction that they believed could possibly be in violation of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act. Because some entities take questions, or they question the legality of advanced deposit wagering on horse racing. Some credit card companies simply have informed their processor not to allow transactions that come from 7802 merchants, that would be ADWs, are given the merchant credit merchant code 7802. That was a code that we, the NTRA, and several others worked for several years to get established by Visa and MasterCard, so that our credit card, they're actually funding transactions. They're not wagering transactions. These are transactions that are used to put money into an account out of which bettors can use that money to bet on horse racing. Those cards, companies issuing banks is who we're talking about now. Credit cards are very complicated. You've got Visa and MasterCard, it's the name of the card. You have issuing banks like MasterCard, or like Bank of America, PNC, Chase. You all have a card in your wallet. It's issued by some issuing bank. Then there are the third-party processors. They're the ones that link up between MasterCard and the issuing bank. And our issue has been with issuing banks, because issuing banks look at the data they're provided by ADWs. They give them legal opinions. They provide all kinds of due diligence background. TVG, Twin Spires, all of our major ADWs go through this process with each of their well, they go through it with credit processors, third-party processors. WorldPay, Vantiv is another processor. Those are names that, if you're in the ADW business, you know well. And they've actually are new players in the market now. But we've been having problems with primarily Bank of America. That's one of the big. Wells Fargo is a sometime problem. Chase Bank came on board about a year and a half ago, and they've been very good to deal with. And they're the biggest issuer of cards there is. So that was good news. PNC Bank is another credit card issuing bank that has no problem with our ADW transactions. Capital One is a problem. They are not allowing their cards to be used to fund ADW accounts. So we're continually bringing individuals like that to Washington. We're bringing their lobbyists, frankly, meeting with our allies on Capitol Hill and convincing them that it's in their best interest, because we have very low decline ratios. There are very few chargebacks from our business. We're actually very safe from the perspective of taking our funding account transactions, and we've made some progress, but there's still work that needs to be done. So we're working on that on a daily basis. We'll see how that pans out. Some cards have good weeks and bad weeks. We're never quite sure why, but the reason that's a legislative matter is because we have important allies on the Hill, including Andy Barr. Congressman Barr is on the Financial Services Committee of the House. And so he is someone who meets frequently with lobbyists and others from these credit card issuing banks. And that's an important line of communication that we have with them to try to encourage people to cooperate with us. And, we pay our fees. There's no question it's a good thing. That really dovetails to the second issue. Brian, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to that issue as well, because that has to do
All right.
with the merchant code category, sports betting. Okay.
Yep.
Greg, you're not on. Greg and I've been working a lot on this particular issue because this is a unique related issue on the credit card front. You hear a lot now about sports betting, a lot of interest on the part of bettors, in particular horse players, who would like the ability to get onto one portal, one web portal, to bet traditional sports betting or ADW wagering on horse racing, or for that matter, they'd also like to have some fixed odd wagering on horse racing. And to do that, they want a single wallet so that they can take money that's an account with that entity, and they can spend money on the Cubs game today or the 3-horse in the 3rd race at Santa Anita. It's important that you have a single wallet and a single platform for customer convenience. That can't happen right now. And you'll read a lot. Horse racing Twitter is interesting. It's generally attributed to the ineptitude of horse racing people. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, it has nothing to do with ineptitude. It's the law. What happens is because of sports betting has its own merchant code, which is 7801. We, the ADWs, have a merchant code 7802. We actually fought for that bifurcation several years ago because sports betting was illegal and we didn't want to be confused or be lumped in with sports betting. We wanted our own code to be separate. Now that sports betting has been made legal, PASPA has been overturned. Many states are bringing sports betting in, like 22 states, I believe, have adopted a sports betting bill. All of a sudden, we'd like to be back together because it's the issue is that the two different codes mean the dollars that come in under 7802 have to be segmented and segregated from dollars under 7801. Otherwise, you're going to violate the terms of your agreement with your credit card issuing banks and your processors. So unless and until we get those codes merged in some way or some agreement for a third code that would allow those monies to be spent on either a sports bet or a horse racing bet, we're left with this situation which horse players don't like. So we're in conversation with Visa and others about what it's going to take to get a common code or to merge the codes, to do it in a way that doesn't disadvantage the sports betting or horse racing in any way. We don't want to set anyone back, but we do want to move forward with a common code, single platform, single wallet for everybody involved. Vitally important to horse racing. You talk to the ADW companies and they will tell you this is one of the most important issues they have. Because if they can get just access to just 5% of sports betting customers, that would be a big increase for horse racing. So we're focused on that. That's a major issue. In fact, we've got a meeting next week with representatives from one of the credit card issuing companies to begin the process. The last time we took this, it took this issue up. We began the conversations back before I came to the NTRA, and it was not until 2015 that the 7802 code was created. So we don't want it to last that long. We want to move it more quickly, but there's a lot of work to be done. We're on it. We'll keep the industry apprised because it's too important. But as of today, I have no assurances. But I do know that we're going to try the same strategy we've tried in the past, which is to use allies on the Hill to convince these issuing banks and credit card companies that allowing this sort of activity is not violative of the Internet Gambling Enforcement Act. It doesn't violate the Wire Act. It is consistent with the Interstate Horse Racing Act, and to allow us to move forward. So fingers crossed, we're going to be working on that over the next 6 to 12 months and hopefully bring that problem under control for the industry, for the sports betting and for horse racing. Questions on that?
Let's see. I don't see any. Alex, pretty quickly, what are the committees of jurisdiction you're working with on those issues?
The committees of jurisdiction, financial services, that would be the primary one. It's the credit cards come under their jurisdiction. And that's
Or it's
in-house.
on financial.
Pardon me?
Yeah, Bars on
Bars.
Financial Services.
Still Barrett. Yeah, he is still our, we will branch out because we also like to have someone in the majority party in the House. And we'll look to what we can find in the Senate, but this really needs to begin in the House. It's not like we're passing a bill. So we don't really have to have even bipartisanship for that matter, but these credit card companies, though, they need to know that to get other issues passed, they need to listen at least carefully to what members of the Financial Services Committee have to say. It's like so many things in DC right now. It's so hard to pass any standalone legislation of any kind. We find ourselves looking for ways around those inevitable roadblocks. Standalone legislation just rarely, if ever, passes. Not only do you need a vehicle, you need pretty strong bipartisan support. And even then, hundreds, if not thousands of bills languished in the Senate last session. And they're continuing to do the same in this session just because of the difficulties and because of filibusters and the way in which the Senate operates. It's very difficult to get anything through the Senate without 60 votes. So that significantly limits anything that can be done without strong support from leadership, and which I think will be there eventually, but we have to get our ducks in a row.
Yep, end of year spending package sometime in December. All right, so I don't see any more questions on the whole sports betting issue. So, Mr. Chairman, you want to move on to equine assisted services?
Well, I tell you what, why don't you, Brian? I think you've got as much to say about that as I do.
Okay.
I think we're
All right.
the same-
There's a racing
same
twist
page.
to it. So, yeah, for the past 4 years, the industry has definitely lobbied for funds appropriated in the Department of Veterans Affairs budget to support equine assisted services. The program is a win-win for retired racehorses and American veterans. For FY22, the industry currently supports Congressman Barr's latest request. He's proposing to fund DVA's adaptive sports program at $20 million with a $5 million set aside specifically for equine assisted services. That's more than double the amounts we've had in years past, which have ranged between $500,000 and $1.5 million. And we'll have a youth summit next week. We're going to hear from Barr's staff, and they're going to spend a lot of time talking about EAS and the prospects of their provision moving forward in the spending bill process. That's really all I've
That's
got.
That's in the VA portion of the appropriations,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's the current, that's the target agency.
We're aware of a couple of very important programs, several programs that could utilize these funds. We're in touch with the Man of War Project, Ambassador Earl Mack, but there are others. And Congressman Barr is working on behalf of several interested groups in the thoroughbred industry, and we certainly support that. The challenge is right now, it's our understanding the VA is looking for cuts, not for additions. And so once again, we're sort of going to be up against a challenging situation where there may not be dollars there available for these kinds of programs for veterans, not veterinarians, wrong committee. So we'll stay tuned, but certainly support what Congressman Barr is doing and look forward to hearing what his staff has to say.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
The meat cleaver for budget cuts is always a big problem. But to be on the optimistic side here, this has always been a very popular issue and a very popular program. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in the mix in the final budget.
It does provide great second careers for racehorses, and it should be on everybody's list of things to support because it could really be a huge benefit to us as an industry to provide even more opportunities. You know, and the beauty about the EAS is that many of the horses that participate in these therapy programs may be such that they can't go into second careers, but their paddocks sound such that doing the kinds of therapy they're doing is a real plus, and it's an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have. They may come out of racing with injuries that leave them unable to trail ride or do some of the things that we'd like to see them do as second careers. But this is the kind of work that even a horse that's simply paddock found can do. And so it's a great opportunity.
This conversation has just spurred my memory here. So we did have the whole Veteran Act, which passed last year. And it's a pretty simple bill that would authorize the study of the effectiveness of different treatments for veterans, suffering from PTSD and other disorders. EAS is among those treatments that's actually going to be studied. So I'll take a look at that and see what the timeline is for the study, because it's law. Once something's assessed and we get more data on the effectiveness of EAS, that'll be a good talking point to promote the program on a variety of different tracks, I think.
Good. Good.
All right, so moving along, let's see, we've got, looks like we're down to other business. Alex.
Well, with sports betting, just one small issue on sports betting. There is some move afoot to there's a federal sports betting tax, 0.25% on legal, 0.5% on illegal sports betting. Looks like there's a movement to get rid of that. Why I bring that up in this call is simply, it's, I think, good news for all of us that worry about the possibility, the potential for a federal tax on horse racing. So that's just be aware of that. That's right. So we're now to other business.
Other business.
I have none.
All
I don't
right,
have
well, Cliff Williamson had an interesting discussion with USDA folks on a racehorse/welfare issue crossover. I saw him sign in earlier.
I thought you were going to cover that in the closed session.
Yeah, I might
Oh, that's
bring
right.
that up during
Yeah.
the closed session, Brian.
That's right. I'm sorry, y'all. That's closed session.
Okay.
So before everybody, we go to closed session, just a reminder that we have one more session on our conference today. It starts at 4. This is the first time we've done a focus on the traditional working horse sector. So we have a panel discussion around that, and that will include Kathy the CEO at Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. So there's a little crossover there for that. We're going to hear from Tommy Doyle from the carriage operators, and we also have an individual from the North American Mounted Unit Commanders, which is our mounted police division there. So there's some interesting conversations there. I see Eric's got a hand up. So Eric, you got a question before we go to closed?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Alex, I think you know that the fixed odds push is coming on us pretty heavy right now. In your opinion, since you touched on it just a tiny bit with the sports betting conversation, in your opinion, do you believe fixed odds is covered under the Interstate Horse Racing Act?
Yes. Yep, it is.
Okay. And you're finding the same maybe that I am, that there are several states that do not or cannot legally bet fixed odds on horse racing based on their state statutes?
Yeah, it's a question of state law, no question. Yeah, and I don't know how many are seriously considering it, but it would be a matter of state law.
But we already have a track that's already got a contract, so without the horsemen. So at this point, I'm trying to define what I believe is correct, and I believe you are stating the same. The Interstate Horse Racing Act does apply.
There was a case out of California several years ago, Derby Wars and the Stronach Group. And in that case, the judge ruled that the scope of the Interstate Horse Racing Act encompassed all legal wagers on horse racing, and didn't limit it to. So I think that's at this point in time, that's the controlling precedent. Certainly can challenge that, and there may be, and certainly that was only a California federal court, so it's not precedent beyond that, but it is an instructive case. And based upon that opinion, why I think it probably would be ruled to be.
And last question, do you see this becoming more of a federal issue or staying a state issue?
Staying a state issue.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any more items for other business? Okay, Alex, with that, let's move on to our closed session.
So we will ask those of you that are not committee members to please drop off so they can have some discussion and talk about any kind of recommendations they might want to send forward to the Board of Trustees.